Instead of watching him labor this for another 5 minutes, I'm just going to sum it up for you real quick. And you can watch this video and disagree with me later if you want, but this is what it is. So, money is physical, right? So, in his mind, it's finite. There's only so much money, right? So, if you take money from one person, or if one person needs more money, you have to take it from somebody else. It's a zero-sum game, right? If the poor get unpoor and get richer, well, then the rich have to get poorer, when that's not necessarily true. You could still be rich. You just won't, maybe not own as rich. You may not have as much wealth in that sense, but you could be making more money because now you have a much more productive workforce, right? So this idea that it's a zero-sum game is stupid, and I'm going to tell you why. Money is conceptual. It's not physical. All right? I wish I had it here today, but I have a Confederate dollar from the Confederacy because I think it's funny. Do you know how much that Confederate dollar is worth? Zero. You know why? Because there's no Confederacy. They're gone. We beat them in the Civil War. It's over. Okay? So this is how money essentially works in a simple nutshell so they can understand. I'm going to use my prop here. So my guy, Grogu. Okay? So Alacias, me, Grogu are all stuck on an island. Okay? And Lacey has a bunch of fish, and I need some fish. So I go to Lacey and go, hey, can I get 4 fish? And she's like, well, what are you going to give me? And I'm like, well, I don't have anything right now. I'll write you an IOU that I owe you 4 fish. Okay? And Lacey's like, okay, fine, I'll take it. And so I get the 4 fish. She gets the IOU, right? Well, then Lacey realizes later, oh, shoot, I need coconuts. And Grogu has a ton of coconuts. So Lacey goes to him and go, hey, can I get some coconuts? And he goes, well, what's in it for me? Lacey goes, well, I have this IOU from Duncan. Now, if it's the situation where Grogu's like, well, Duncan always pays back his IOUs on time, right? Then yeah, he'll be like, well, yeah, then that thing is basically worth 4 fish. Because Duncan's never failed to pay back somebody on time. So yeah, I'll take that IOU and then I can go to Duncan and get 4 fish. Right? But if it's one of those situations where it's like, well, Duncan is kind of flaky and he doesn't always pay it back, then that IOU is not worth 4 fish. Because he doesn't know that he's going to get his 4 fish. So he might say, well, gee, Lacey, I don't think it's worth that. I'll give you I'll give you, instead of 10 coconuts, I'll give you 3 coconuts. Because that's all I think it's worth. That IOU is money. Right? The difference is when you're talking about currency from governments, the government is issuing the currency. Okay? So the government owns the money. Right? And we as the people are supposed to be represented by the government. And if you don't believe me that the government owns the money, take a piece of paper from a notebook, like I have a notepad here, right? I could take a piece of paper, I could tear it up, I could burn it. It's my piece of paper. That's totally legal. It's totally fine. If you try to do that with a dollar bill, a US dollar bill, it's illegal. It's illegal to destroy US currency. Now, they don't really enforce it, but it is illegal. Why? Because you don't own it. Now, what's the ultimate value of that currency is that A, the US government has pretty much always paid its debts on time. And it's pretty much the only government in the world that can make that claim, which is why the dollar everything's sort of hinged off the US dollar, which is part of what makes us so powerful as a country. That's why in 9/11, the main target was the World Trade Center. Because the Taliban knows where our power is. Our power is that we can set the price on the value of everything because our money is the one that everything is set against, right? And that's all that money really is. It's a way to measure value of things in a capitalist system. And it's based on demand and supply, typically, not necessarily need or benefit. So that's what it is at the same time. the value of money. It's a conceptual idea. But why is U.S. money valuable? And what makes it valuable is it's the only thing you can use to pay your taxes. They won't accept anything else. I can't give them euros. I can't give them the yen. I can't go kill a deer, right, and give it to the IRS and say, "Hey, count this against my tax bill." No, you have to pay taxes, and you have to pay it in U.S. currency. So to do that, all your valuable goods or sales or whatever has to be translated into U.S. currency in order for you to remain making money and in business. So that's the ultimate value of these things, and it's backed by the taxing power of the government. So that's what the problem is. So that when they're talking about, okay, well, we want to do universal health care, and they go, well, how do you pay for it? That's how you pay for it, by raising taxes, by tax revenue. That's how you pay for things. So every time you deduct revenue from taxes, you cripple the U.S. government because they can't bring in enough income to cover their debts. So there's a not just a political argument, but an economic argument that raising taxes would actually be better overall for the economy. It'd be better for the government as well, and it would help reduce some of the debt problem, which really isn't a huge issue. I mean, we make enough money that it's not a problem yet, but it could be at some point. So this idea that it's some sort of spiritual, thing, like it's Tinkerbell, if you just believe, right? It's conceptual, but it's conceptual because we all agree that it's worth something. If we all started going, I don't think it's worth anything, then it's not worth anything. So this idea that it's physical, tangible is a ridiculous concept. So let's see if we can get to something juicier here. What's he got here?
The wear and tear on the car. Just buy the gasoline wherever it is. She pays more money for a pair of jeans that's got a...
I'm sorry, I might have to skip this a little bit.
You create it out of nothing.
Here it is.
That's where, rather than taking... everyone's in the fixed pie, right? It's not a fixed pie. All right, talk about one of my favorite riffs is Candles and Cakes. Yeah, well, it's the same as musical instruments and music and tunes. And that is that money is brought into existence when one of God's children does something for another. Now, we can use the right terminology. We can call it marketing. We can call it sales. Service. We can call
okay, I'm going to just skip the rest of this. Sorry. But this idea, once again, it all gets tied back to religion. Right? And the other thing about money comes into existence when you provide a service. Well, it comes into existence when you provide a service and I don't have something to barter. I have an IOU that I have to give you, right? Right now, the barter system works this way. I have IOUs from the federal government, which is what a dollar bill is, which is what money is, right? The government's going to honor it and allow you to pay tax with it. That's why it's valuable. So when we're looking at it from, okay, the whole position of socialists don't get this, he's going to make an argument that socialists just take money. They don't actually make money or provide anything. But that's not true, because there are lots of countries that employ a lot of socialist things where those people work more and produce more. And they live much better lives because they don't have to worry about going broke. Right? So I also want to tell you about this guy and why he's so adamant about this. So the rabbi here is, he was born in 1947, and he was born in South Africa. And that's where he lived most of his life. He was raised. Do you know what was going on in South Africa, Lacey, from the 40s to the 1991? Apartheid, maybe? So for those of you who don't know, apartheid was a system, or I mean, there are still apartheid states, but it's in South Africa. There were 4 races that they broke it down into. There was the whites, who was the smallest group. There were the Indians, the coloreds, and the blacks. And the whites owned everything and were the only ones that had voting rights and could serve in government. And the others were told what they could do for work what they were allowed to do for education, where they were allowed to live. In fact, millions, like 3.5 million black people, were literally removed from their homes, and the government confiscated their homes, and they put them in ghettos with the other blacks. And you had to work whatever serf labor you could get. So we're talking about a white guy who was part of a family that was part of apartheid, that was very supportive of it, right? Well, what ended apartheid? People started revolting, especially in the 80s, and then apartheid officially, because the United Nations and the U.S. and a bunch of other countries basically sanctioned and embargoed South Africa, so their economy collapsed. So what happened was the white government had to finally end apartheid in 1991. Now, a bunch of the guys who initially revolted from it, the big one being Nelson Mandela. If you haven't heard his name, he's very famous. He did, 10 years in prison, a long time in prison. And his only crime was being a political leader. Right? But he was demonized by the South African government, spent a lot of time in prison. After it was ended, he got out of prison. He ran for president in their first actual open election, real election in South African history, and he won in 94. And he was the president for a long time. Now, this guy, I'm sure, was not super thrilled about that, but I also think part of his hatred of this is, do you know what Nelson Mandela's political leaning was? He was a socialist. And they implemented socialist policies to redistribute the wealth from the rich white ruling class to all the other classes, to try and even out and make Africa more equal. So
socialism doesn't sound so good if you're in the boat of the people who had the money under the old system.
Right. It's the joke we've done before.
Really wanted to get redistributed on you, right?
Right. It's the joke we've said before is these guys are already multimillionaires. They're already rich. They're already winning the game, which is why they want to sit there and go, well, no. We don't want to change the rules and make it more fair. No. Don't keep score. Don't keep score. Right? Because then you'll realize, wait a minute, they're winning and they didn't really do anything to win. And then you're going to start getting bitter, especially if you're not rich. And that's when people, revolt and say, hey, wait a minute, it's just because I'm black. I can't go to school or get a job that I want. I have to work in some mine somewhere because some white guy told me to. Who's only, 5% of the population? When we're like 70 or 80. But he lived in that. And he's a rabbi now. He's got a thing in California. He's got a bunch of nonprofits. And I think there was a scandal he was in recently where he was giving favors out. But he's also a big supporter of Israel. And Israel is listed by the United Nations as an apartheid state because they've removed Palestinians from their homes and stuffed them into ghettos and no-go zones. And he supports all that. So this is a guy who has a lifelong history of being in support of apartheid. And part of the reason he doesn't like socialism is because socialism is very anti-apartheid and classism. So it really is the enemy for him. So he's got to demonize them. But how do you demonize them? Poor people asking for food. Poor people asking for rights. Oh, well, they just, they don't get the spirituality behind it. And it's not fair to take my money to have to pay for all this, even though I got my money because the people that came before me took all the money from them. Right? So let's not change the rules now. Right?
Oh, man.
Let's pretend history starts today. Oh, man. So that's kind of what I like about this whole thing. And I'm going to wrap